Now we're going to take a moment to look at how to name and write formulas for molecular compounds. When we're naming molecular compounds, we're always going to be using a prefix system. So we're going to need to memorize these prefixes. If we have 1 of something, it's mono, and 2 is di, 3 is tri, and so on. So the thing that we want to remember is that we usually only use a prefix for the second element in a molecular compound, and if we don't hear a prefix at all, it means there's 1 of something, okay? So if we look at P2O5, there's a prefix of di for the phosphorus, and there'd be a prefix of 5 for, penta for the oxygen. So we end up with diphosphorus pentaoxide. Now remember that if the prefix is mono, we're only going to use that on the second element, but if it's any other type of prefix, we'd still use it on the first. Okay, another thing that you can do is if there's a double vowel like pentaoxide, we can actually shorten that to pentoxide. So it's just a little easier to say and to write. All right, so what about nitrogen dioxide? What would the formula for that be? Well, nitrogen doesn't have a prefix, so that's a clue to us that there's just 1 of it. And oxygen has a prefix of di, which means there's 2 oxygens. So the molecular formula would be NO2. Another thing you want to remember is that molecular hydrogen compounds don't use prefixes. So if we have H2S, that's hydrogen sulfide. Even though there's 2 of the hydrogen, we don't say dihydrogen sulfide. Some of these molecular compounds are really common, and it's really beneficial to you if you can be familiar with them and recognize them. They're not usually named using prefixes, but rather by these names shown here. Now the nice thing is your data booklet does have all of these compounds in a list. So if here's ammonia, for example, it's NH3. So if you forget them, they're all there, but you need to know to look for it. All right, so let's look at some naming practice. So we have carbon monoxide. Okay, so there's no prefix on carbon. That tells me that there's 1 of it. And we have monoxide. This means there's 1 of it, and there's 1 oxygen. Okay. How about hydrogen sulfide? Okay. Remember, we don't use a prefix on that hydrogen, sulfide, because it's a hydrogen compound. But we should be able to tell a couple of different ways what the amounts of hydrogen and sulfur would be in the molecule. The first way is that it is on this table here. So you could just see the name here and copy down the formula. That's kind of a cheaty way to do it, but it's fine. Another way that you would know is you can look at the periodic table. And remember how we knew the charges of all these nonmetals because of the columns they were in? Well, sulfur has a -1 charge, and hydrogen has a +1 charge. So we could actually, because the hydrogen is positive there, we could actually use the cross and drop method to balance that compound formula.